And this gigantic bombshell from the National Football League. The Raiders announced that the Ravens backed out of the trade agreement that would have sent all-pro defensive end and game wrecker Maxx.
In the NFL, rumors surface every offseason. Most fade away within hours. But when the name Maxx Crosby suddenly started appearing in trade discussions, it caught the entire league off guard. Crosby is not just another defensive player. He is the heart of the Las Vegas Raiders defense and one of the most relentless pass rushers in football. Hearing his name connected to trade speculation immediately triggered a wave of reactions from analysts, fans, and rival teams. The conversation began quietly. A few insiders mentioned that the Raiders might be evaluating the direction of their roster.
Shefty. Okay, let's talk about that Maxx Crosby trade, shall we? Because we haven't really gotten a chance to take a bite out of the apple. Baltimore Ravens take a huge swing and bring in the Energizer Bunny, a guy who's considered a GOAT, considered a great. We've never got a chance to see him in primetime games.
Some reports suggested the team could be entering a reset after another disappointing season. Then the discussion shifted from general rebuilding talk to a much bigger question. What if the Raiders considered moving their most valuable defensive asset? That possibility instantly became a major talking point across NFL media. Television panels debated whether the Raiders would actually consider such a move. Fans across social media began imagining what Crosby could do on a contender. Some analysts even suggested that if Crosby truly became available, half the league would call within minutes.
Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, and he also has, Khalil Mack, now Maxx Crosby, amongst other things. Feels like they're loading up for a defense that's about to be back to greatness again next year.
Yeah, they got great players on every level.
What makes this rumor so explosive is Crosby's importance to the Raiders. He is not only a top-tier pass rusher, but also one of the emotional leaders of the team. His effort level, intensity, and production have made him a fan favorite in Las Vegas. Trading a player like that would signal a dramatic shift in the organization's strategy. For now, nothing has been confirmed. The Raiders have not publicly stated any intention to move Crosby, but the mere possibility has already created one of the most fascinating storylines of the offseason. When a franchise cornerstone suddenly becomes part of the rumor mill, the entire league starts paying attention. And that is exactly what is happening with Maxx Crosby. To understand why these rumors even exist, it is important to look at the Raiders' recent history. Over the last several seasons, the organization has struggled to establish stability. Coaching changes, roster turnover, and inconsistent performances have prevented the team from building sustained success.
Well, Scott, you rarely see trades as large as the one that the Raiders and Ravens agreed to on Friday night, where you say, whoa,
right?
And then you rarely see a trade voided the way that this one was when the Baltimore Ravens backed out of the arrangement that they had made with the Raiders on Friday.
For a competitor like Maxx Crosby, that kind of instability can be difficult. Crosby has built a reputation as one of the hardest working players in the league. His motor never stops. Every game he plays with the intensity of someone determined to dominate the opponent across from him. Players with that mindset usually want one thing above everything else: a real chance to compete for championships. Unfortunately for the Raiders, playoff success has been rare. The team has frequently found itself hovering around the middle of the standings, never fully rebuilding, but also not consistently competing with the top teams in the AFC. That kind of situation can create frustration for star players who feel their prime years slipping away. Reports around the league have hinted that Crosby simply wants to win. That does not necessarily mean he wants to leave Las Vegas, but it does mean he wants to see a clear direction for the franchise. Players often become uneasy when the long-term plan of the organization is unclear.
So there are a whole host of ramifications. Moments ago, Maxx Crosby's agent, CJ LeBoy, issued a statement that Maxx Crosby is doing great, he'll be back, better than ever, and he'll be the game wrecker. But meanwhile, the Raiders have Maxx Crosby back in their possession.
Another factor is the physical and mental toll of being the centerpiece of a struggling defense. Crosby constantly faces double teams. Opposing offenses design entire game plans around slowing him down. While he still produces at a high level, the pressure on him remains enormous. None of this guarantees that Crosby is unhappy with the Raiders. However, in the NFL, frustration combined with uncertainty can quickly turn into speculation. When a superstar wants to compete at the highest level, rumors about his future are almost inevitable. And that is exactly where Crosby's situation currently stands.
Let's go to free agency fun zone. Schrags, who all was in for Maxx Crosby? I heard a lot of names. Cowboys. I heard maybe Patriots.
Yeah,
Bears maybe. Instead, it ends up being the Ravens. Did we know this, Schrags?
No, several teams were involved with this one, and the Ravens early on Friday did offer those 2 first-round picks. What's interesting is no one else were able to match that, so the Raiders were dangling it a little bit, and the Ravens become the destination.
At first glance, the idea of trading Maxx Crosby sounds almost impossible. Teams rarely move players who are still performing at an elite level, especially when those players are leaders inside the locker room. However, the NFL is also a league driven by long-term strategy, salary cap planning, and roster building. If the Raiders believe they are entering a rebuilding phase, the logic behind considering a trade becomes clearer. Crosby is one of the most valuable defensive players in the league. Because of that, his trade value would be enormous. A team looking for an elite pass rusher might be willing to offer multiple high draft picks to acquire him. For a franchise trying to reshape its roster, those draft assets could become extremely attractive. Draft picks allow teams to add younger players on affordable contracts. They also provide flexibility to move around the draft board or fill multiple roster needs. Another factor is timing. Crosby is currently in his prime. His value may never be higher than it is right now. If the Raiders were ever going to consider a trade, this would be the moment when the return package could be the largest. There is also the reality that rebuilding teams often move veteran stars to accelerate the process. By collecting draft picks, they aim to build a younger core that can grow together over several seasons. None of this means the Raiders want to trade Crosby, but from a purely strategic perspective, teams sometimes have to consider difficult decisions. When a roster needs significant changes, even a franchise cornerstone can become part of the conversation. That possibility alone is why the rumor refuses to disappear.
We just had one of the more stunning situations I can remember in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens have backed out of the Maxx Crosby trade, the blockbuster trade that happened several nights ago to kick off.
If Maxx Crosby ever became available, the market for him would be enormous. Elite pass rushers are among the most valuable players in football. They can change games with a single play, disrupt opposing quarterbacks, and completely alter offensive game plans. Crosby has consistently proven that he belongs in that elite category. His combination of strength, speed, and relentless effort makes him one of the most dangerous edge rushers in the league. Offensive coordinators spend entire weeks preparing for him. Even then, he still finds ways to get into the backfield. Because of that impact, teams looking to contend for a championship would immediately show interest. A dominant pass rusher can transform a defense overnight. Adding someone like Crosby could push a good team into legitimate Super Bowl contention. The cost, however, would likely be enormous. Recent trades involving star defensive players have shown how expensive these deals can become. Teams have surrendered first-round picks, additional draft selections, and even players to acquire elite talent.
The Ravens did the physical earlier today and decided, based on what they saw in the physical, that they were not comfortable with trading for Maxx Crosby, which would be, of course, trading for 2 first-rounders and his contract.
In Crosby's case, the asking price would probably begin with at least 1 first-round pick and potentially much more. The Raiders know exactly how valuable he is, and they would not consider a trade without a return package capable of reshaping their roster. That kind of price would limit the number of teams able to make a serious offer. But for franchises that believe they are entering a one player away from competing for a championship, the opportunity to add Crosby could be worth the cost. Which is why, even as rumors swirl, the entire league is watching closely. If Maxx Crosby ever truly became available, several teams would immediately explore the possibility of trading for him. Elite pass rushers are rare, and contenders are always looking for ways to strengthen their defensive front. Crosby's ability to pressure quarterbacks and disrupt offenses would make him one of the most dangerous players on the market. One team often mentioned in speculation is the Detroit Lions. Detroit has been building a strong roster and has already shown that it wants to compete at the highest level in the NFC. Adding a relentless edge rusher like Crosby could elevate their defense and make them even more dangerous in the playoffs. The Chicago Bears could also be a surprising contender. With significant cap flexibility and draft assets, Chicago has the resources to pursue a major defensive upgrade. Pairing Crosby with a young roster could accelerate their path towards becoming a serious contender. Another possibility is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas has a history of making bold moves when they believe a superstar can push them closer to a championship. A defensive line featuring Crosby alongside other talented pass rushers would create constant pressure for opposing quarterbacks. Even teams already competing at the top might be tempted. Any franchise with Super Bowl ambitions understands the value of adding a game-changing defender. That's why if Maxx Crosby ever became available, the competition to acquire him would likely be intense. Despite all the speculation, there are strong reasons why the Raiders might ultimately refuse to trade Maxx Crosby. Simply put, players like him are incredibly difficult to replace. Crosby is not only productive on the field, he is also a major presence in the locker room and a leader for the defense.
For the Raiders, Crosby represents the identity of their defensive unit. His work ethic, intensity, and consistency have made him one of the most respected players on the roster. Trading a player who embodies the team's culture could send the wrong message to both the locker room and the fan base. There's also the reality that rebuilding does not always require moving every star player. Many teams prefer to keep a core leader while adding younger talent around him. Crosby could remain the centerpiece of the defense while the organization focuses on strengthening other areas of the roster. Fan reaction is another factor. Crosby has become extremely popular among Raiders supporters because of the way he plays the game. Moving a player who represents the heart of the team could create significant backlash. Ultimately, while the rumors are interesting, the Raiders still hold complete control over the situation. Unless an extraordinary trade offer appears, the organization may decide that keeping its defensive superstar is the better long-term decision. For now, Maxx Crosby remains a Raider, but the rumors have placed a spotlight on the team's future direction. If Las Vegas shows signs of competing, the conversation will likely disappear quickly. But if struggles continue, speculation about Crosby's future could return even stronger. Teams across the league will be watching closely, ready to act if an opportunity appears. One thing is clear: whenever a superstar like Crosby becomes part of trade discussions, the entire NFL pays attention.